What's up, Night Owl? Still here back with another Candlekeep video, and today we're going to be having a look at the Book of Cylinders. Without a doubt, this adventure had the most controversy surrounding it, and that's because the author of this adventure was not happy with the cuts that Wizards of the Coast made to their adventure and some of the language that they decided to add, and it got pretty messy, and the author actually requested that their name be scrubbed from future publishing of Candlekeep Mysteries. So I'm going to go over that at the end of the video. I'm going to go over what the artist's or what the author's original vision was for the adventure and kind of how you can incorporate that. I'll leave links down in the description to the story. I don't want to get like too much into it. This is a guide for the adventure, not like a news article. So I'm going to mention the changes that I would recommend that you make to make it more in line with the author's vision. And I'm also going to leave a link to the article so you can make your own assumptions about that and like how to build on that. But with that being said, let's get to the video. And as usual, I have new maps for you in the Discord. Link is down there in the description. Set your role to Dungeon Master, and you can find them in the Dungeon Master Resources channel. I have two maps for you from the book. The book gives you two maps. I remade those. And I also provided two more maps, one for the Crab Maze and one for the Brood Pools. I highly recommend that you use a map for those two encounters. And I'll go over why later in the video. You don't necessarily have to use my maps. I just needed something, so I made two maps for you guys. So there's a total of 4 maps for this adventure. Highly recommend that you have a map, especially for the Brood Pools, because there's a lot of movement and terrain interaction that you're going to want to visually look at for that particular encounter. And I'll go over that later in the video, but for now, set your role to Dungeon Master, grab those maps, and let's move on. And if you want to see me DM these games live, I do stream them on Twitch. Link is down there in the description. You can come by, see me make mistakes, and correct them. You can see any adjustments that I make to the adventure in real time, and you can just come by and ask questions. To start this adventure off, the Avowed are going to inform the party that they rely on a nearby Gripply village for regular shipments of seafood. The Gripply are known to raise giant crabs, and they trade with the Gripply for this seafood. And lately, over the past few 10 days, these shipments have been cut off, have been kind of in a trickle, and there's rumors that serpent people are attacking the Gripply. So the Avowed are going to offer the party 500 gold pieces each to meet up with a sailor who runs shipments between the Gripply village and Candlekeep, to meet up with this sailor and get some information and hitch a ride over to the Gripply village. The Avowed will also provide the party with the Book of Cylinders, which is a book that contains literally a couple of cylinders and some clay. And the party can use these cylinders to roll out the clay on a surface and read the contents of the book. These cylinders are just an exposition jump. I personally cut the information out of these cylinders and sort of spread them across the adventure as the party goes, but you can give them all the information here if you like. It just tells the story of the Gripply and of the Yuan-Ti. Another change that I made to the introduction to this chapter is rather than have the Avowed approach the party and just tell them about the Gripply and the problem with the seafood shipments, I instead started my party off in the hearth in Candlekeep having a meal. And while they're having their meal, they're informed by one of the servants of the hearth that, I'm sorry, we're out of seafood due to some shipment delays, and that can kind of give the party rumors that way. That way it affects the party directly. Like they're trying to have this meal, they want their crab cakes or something, and the barmaid comes over like, I'm sorry, we're out of seafood. Is there anything else you want? And they can even meet the sailor in the tavern or have the sailor throwing a fit because they don't have their crab cakes or their crab meat. Anything like that, it feels a little bit more natural to have it evolve like that. So that's just a recommendation. You don't have to have the Avowed walk up and hand them a book like, here's the adventure. You can kind of have it play out naturally, but this is entirely up to you. At this point, the party will be able to meet with the sailor, whose name is Meteor Jans. And Jans makes a living running shipments between Candlekeep and the Gripply trading post. So he would happily volunteer to get the party there to the trading post in order to get production going again so we can get back to work. The party will have the option to either go with Jans on his boat to the trading post, or they can go overland, which will take longer, and the book even emphasizes that this is more dangerous, and that you should punish your party for taking the land route by throwing in random encounters. I don't necessarily agree with this, not at all, but that's up to you. That's what the book says, that if they take the land route, you should punish them with random encounters. If you want, but that's not this DM. Moving on. However, the party decides to get to the trading post, it's at this point that they will meet the Gripply, and they will learn that the Gripply have a really hard time replicating the common tongue. They can understand the party when they speak to them, but as far as speaking back, they're going to have to speak Primordial or Gripply. And Jans, the sailor Jans, will act as a translator for the party if he is there with them. The party will also see that the Gripply's trading post is being overrun from refugees by the main Gripply village who are trying to escape the Yuan-Ti. You can have a few Gripply warriors escort the party to the Pond Mother, who acts as sort of the matriarch of the Gripply. And she's here at the trading post, and if she meets with the party, you can have the Pond Mother sort of inform the party that her people need help. And you can also give them some information about the Gripply culture, and you can also mention that there are good Yuan-Ti. There's a lot of information to be dealt here by this Pond Mother, so I recommend reading through and kind of pick what you like. I want to point out here that the good Yuan-Ti, the party's going to be suspicious of the good Yuan-Ti that are in the Gripply village. The Pond Mother will tell the party that a few good aligned Yuan-Ti showed up and met with the Gripply and were sort of helping them out, and then the evil Yuan-Ti showed up and attacked, and the party's going to be immediately suspicious of the good Yuan-Ti. If you want to encourage that, that's fine, but if you don't want to deal with that, if you want there to be trust with those good Yuan-Ti, you can have a few good Yuan-Ti here at the Gripply trading post, who, like a few purebloods that managed to escape the Gripply village along with the Gripply. And then you can have the party talk with them, and you can have an NPC that sort of verifies that they are good and that they worship the Scaled Mother and not any evil deities that the Yuan-Ti worship or who are after. There's a lot of information to be provided here, so kind of read the room, read your party, and see what will work, what you want to keep and what you want to cut out. There's a few groups where I just cut out the good Yuan-Ti completely and just had bad guys for the parties to go fight, and there's a few other groups that I added a little bit more depth to the story. So take that for however you will, and if you really want to get into the story, the original the author of this story, the uncut version, has a ton of story that got cut, and he goes over a lot of that in his article, which is in the description. Again, it's in the description. So you can have a look at that if you want to build more on the story aspect of the Gripply and the Yuan-Ti. Once your party has everything they need from the trading post, it's on to the crab maze and to the Gripply village itself. Now, this crab maze is easily my favorite artwork in the entire Candlekeep book, and I'd like you to just take a second and appreciate this piece. And speaking of fantastic artwork, let's have a look at that crab maze battle map that I made for you guys. Isn't it beautiful? All joking aside, there is a chance that as the party moves across this crab maze that they're going to get in a fight with a couple of giant crabs. Now, this adventure is for a 6th level party, and even if you roll max on the encounter, which is a D4 plus 2, you're going to end up with 6 giant crabs. The 6th level party will absolutely wipe the floor with these giant crabs, and it'll just be more of an annoyance than anything. If you want to up the difficulty of this challenge a bit, I had that when the last crab falls, a huge giant crab comes up and attacks the party. And this is from the book, from the Yawning Portal book, and it's a CR9, but it's really no issue for a 6th level party. None of my parties had any difficulty dealing with this thing. It looks scary, but it is one monster for the party to focus on, and it'll get down. It'll just make the party make the encounter more interesting. Correction, huge giant crab is a CR8, and it also doesn't have a token. So who better to represent this crab than Kingler? On the other side of the crab maze is the Gripply village. Now, I made some cuts here at the Gripply village as well because the Yuan-Ti purebloods that patrol this village are nothing for a level 6 party. They're a CR1, they have 40 hit points, and there's just not much to them. They by themselves they can't do much. If you want to have the patrols going around the Gripply village, I would add a Malison to the group just to make it a little bit more interesting. Or you could just stack all the encounters that you want to have one big encounter at the brood pools and just leave the village abandoned. This is entirely up to you. This is just a suggestion. The purebloods by themselves are not very strong, and they'll be just sort of steamrolled by a level 6 party. So also it would depend on the party, but for the most part, and that's actually representative of the entire adventure. This adventure is pretty easy. You may want to make some adjustments to the future encounters as well, and I'll point those out as we go. But overall, the encounters in this adventure are pretty easy, and this is coming from somebody who's ran this adventure 5 times, and each of the time it was just kind of a cakewalk. There's no real threat. Even the huge giant crab, it was able to drop a party member, but it wasn't able to kill anybody. This is overall, it's a pretty easy adventure. And if that's what your group would like, go for it. But this is something to keep in mind going forward. There's nothing really of note in the homes and storage locations throughout the village. You can feel free to add some potions, scrolls, or maybe some common magic items, some mundane gold loot, whatever you feel like. But by the book, this is just filler. Over at the Pawn Mother's home, the party will find a couple of good-aligned Yuan-Ti being held prisoner by a couple of evil-aligned Yuan-Ti. And there's nothing really of note other than that. If the party decides to free the good Yuan-Ti, they can fill them in on information about the temple up the river, and you can give them any more exposition that you may have cut out from previous for time or for whatever reason. You can give them some information here, kind of fill in on Yuan-Ti story and lore. But these Yuan-Ti will give the party direction to the temple at the ending of the chapter. Now for the brood pools. I love this encounter, but it absolutely needs to have a battle map. I made one myself. You don't necessarily have to use that one. You can find another one or make your own. But I definitely recommend that you have a map for this encounter because it's going to involve a Yuan-Ti with poison going around 5 brood pools and poisoning them and destroying them. And one of your party's side quest is to save these eggs. And if they do so, the Gripply will actually perform a ritual for the party at the end of the chapter. It's really cool side quest, really cool reward. So you want to emphasize, it'll be obvious once initiative starts and one of the Yuan-Ti doesn't attack and instead starts poisoning pools. The party, it's going to click right away that it's time that they need to save these eggs, if they weren't hired by the Pawn Mother in the first place to save the eggs. Now, I added a few more stipulations to the brood pools. If you notice on the map, I made it pretty tight. That way they couldn't use their AoE spells like Fireball or Shatter, or they had to be really tactical about it. Also put a lot of Gripply around for casualties. So this is I designed this encounter to be really tactical and like the party had to think it out. And I really enjoyed how it turned out. This encounter by itself, it will be pretty easy, even with saving the eggs. So if you want to make it a little more challenging, or if you have a larger size party, like say 6 people, or you have a party of experienced players, feel free to add another Malison or 2 even. Have 4 Malisons, 4 purebloods. By the book, it's 4 purebloods and 2 Malisons. One of them goes around poisoning, while the other, 2 Malisons. One goes around poisoning, the other fights with the 4 purebloods. This will be a pretty easy encounter. Very low chance of failure on that one. If you want to make it a little bit more difficult and maybe up the reward at the end of the adventure, make this encounter more difficult, up the reward, add a couple more Malisons, and you can increase the reward at the end. And I'll have some recommendations for that in a moment. If your party saved the good Yuan-Ti at the Pawn Mother's home or the Gripply at the brood pools, they will probably learn about the old village and the temple that the Yuan-Ti have taken over and are currently performing rituals at. And they're probably going to want to go stop that. With that information, the party will be able to follow the river north until they find a group of Gripply prisoners outside of the temple. Now, there's really not much to this temple. It's only got 2 locations, the first being flanked by a couple of staircases that lead down 15 feet to a dead end, and this is because the Yuan-Ti are currently excavating underneath the temple. And the second room is where they are performing their ritual, and this is where the combat will take place. This fight, like the previous fights in this chapter, aren't super difficult. It's just a couple of Malisons and the Abomination. Feel free to add more as you see fit, depending on the size of the party. If your party decides to engage the Yuan-Ti and then back up to Area 1, the Yuan-Ti do use longbows, and they will line up in the high ground and just rain arrows down and then keep cover. They're not dumb. They do have a pretty decent intelligence, and they will use those tactics. Also, the Yuan-Ti Abomination has the fear spell, and it will wait for the right opportunity to get as many party members as it can with that fear, and the other Yuan-Ti will just leave them alone while they focus down the rest of the targets. So the Yuan-Ti will be tactical about this fight. They will position for arrows if the party decides to play defensively, or if the party decides to move up, they will use flanking tactics, or however if you decide to run that, and they will use their scimitars. Once the fight is over, the party will find the sarcophagus. The fat loot in this temple is the Chime of Opening, the Serpent Scale Armor, and the awesome Serpent's Fang, which does an extra D10 poison damage per hit. If your party managed to save at least 1 egg from the brood pools, the Pawn Mother is so grateful that she will perform a ritual for the party, allowing them to speak and understand Gripply. Now, I personally spiced this ritual up a little bit, and I made it to where the party could actually breathe underwater as well. I thought that was pretty cool. You could give them a feat if you like, or anything cool. Depending on how hard the brood pool was on your party, you can adjust their reward based off of that. Now let's talk about the author's original intentions for this adventure. Now, the purpose of this video is not to choose a side. That's not what we're doing. We went over what Wizards of the Coast provided and what's in the book that you got. Now we're going to talk about what the author had in mind. We're just going to go over that. And if you want to stay true to the author, I will make some suggestions on that. We'll go over what he said or what he provided in his blog, and I'll leave a link to both of those in the description. You don't have to do this, obviously. That's why I did this at the end. So if you just want to stick with what the book has and don't want to get caught up in the drama, there you go. And this is more for if you want to stay truer to the author's intention. Now, the first big difference with the Panzer Cut is that there was no sailor that took the party to the Gripply village. Instead, the party used the scrolls that were in the Book of Cylinders to roll out clay in order to piece together the information about this prophecy and then to go stop it. And whether or not the party used dry clay or wet clay, it would actually have a different story for both. These scrolls told the story of the good Yuan-Ti who were trying to bring their goddess back and the evil Yuan-Ti trying to stop them. Now, the second big difference is that Panzer had it to where you could go the sea route or the land route, whereas the book more pushes you towards the sea route and even goes so far as to punish you if you decide to go the land route. And Panzer says, and I quote, "I can tell you with no uncertainty that I would never write something like that into an adventure. Both routes were viable in the original." End quote. Something that I really liked about the Panzer Cut is that the Pond Mother's ritual actually caused the party's skin to have Gripply coloration under certain circumstances, and this marks them as friendly to the Gripply. Now, the last change that I want to touch on is some of the language that was used in the book that the author did not approve of, and that's using the word primitive to describe some of the Gripply huts. Panzer used the words simple and utilitarian to describe the Gripply and said that their buildings had were more colorfully decorated and more cultured. And the book more describes them and actually uses the word primitive, which Panzer was not happy about using the colonialist language to describe the Gripply. So that was another one of those, that was a big problem for Panzer. Now, this is by no means definitive, and I may have even misinterpreted some of the information in this article. This is simply my attempt at trying to stay true to the author's intentions, the author who wrote this adventure's intentions, and just to see what their side of the story was like and what their adventure may have been like. This isn't about choosing a side. I will leave a link to the article where he explains all of it and his Twitter where he described what happened. The article will pretty much sum up everything as well as their experience with Wizards, and you can decide that for yourself. Link in the description. And if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, you know how YouTube works. Hit those buttons, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think of the Book of Cylinders, and if you want to be a part of this D&D community, make sure you join the Discord. Link is also in the description. Come by, ask questions, let me know what you think. And as always, I'll see you at sundown.